Welcome to Leaders Lead Podcast. Are you ready to conquer your challenges and achieve greatness? Join us as we dive into inspirational stories of industry leaders who have overcome adversity and reached new heights. Get ready for electrifying insights and captivating conversations that will ignite your passions for success. This is your go-to show for empowerment, growth, and leadership. Buckle up. Leaders Lead Podcast is here to take you on a transformational ride. Hey, my friends. Welcome to Leaders Lead the Podcast. I am super excited. I have a very special guest with me today, and that is Charlotte Laws. I've been posting about it. She was on one of my favorite Netflix docuseries. I say my favorite. It's not a good docuseries, but it's Charlotte taking down the internet's most hated person. And in my opinion, one of the biggest scumbags known to humankind. I was really inspired by the leadership of Charlotte. And I'll tell you, Charlotte, I'm talking directly to you now, the audience. Y'all going to have to take a back seat. I'm super excited. I am a fan of yours, like I was saying before. As a parent, I think what you did was so incredible. I've been in situations before where I, questioned myself as a parent. Am I doing the right thing? Should I go harder? Am I going too hard? And when I watched this documentary and I watched the way that you navigated, you wouldn't take no for an answer. I had to reach out to you because I'm so inspired by that. And that inspired me to want to inspire other parents that I know on a firsthand and first name basis that might not be fighting the things that you were fighting, but they were fighting for their children. And I wanted to talk to you and also tell you thank you for what you did, not just for your own household, but what you did for the families of others. So welcome to Leaders Lead, and thank you so much for gracing our audience with your amazing presence.
Well, thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you for saying yes. I didn't think you would say yes. So how has life been since that Netflix docuseries came out?
Well, it's been good. I mean, I continue to try to help victims. I've helped over 800 victims to date on the issue of revenge porn or image-based sexual abuse, whatever you want to call it. And so I continue to take phone calls and emails and help in every way I can. And then I try to put my heart and soul into other causes as well. So it's been very good.
Wow. Did you say 800?
Yeah, over 800 in the past 12 years.
Wow. And this, the stuff that happened with your family, that was 12 years ago, correct?
It started in 2012 and it went on for about 2 years. So it was a really grueling, difficult process. But luckily, we've been able to get laws now in 48 states against revenge porn. And there are 2 states left, which is Massachusetts and South Carolina. And it looks like Massachusetts will be passing a law soon. Unfortunately, we do not have a federal law yet. And we've tried and tried and tried. And so far, nothing has passed. But there are a couple things in the works right now, such as the Protect Act. So I'm hopeful that something will pass that will have protection for the entire United States.
Wow. Do you feel like you've been able to get some support, like mass support when it comes to all of these different laws changing, or have you had to fight?
It was a lot of fighting at the beginning. It was extremely difficult. Not only, when I started this whole thing, nobody really knew anything about nude pictures being circulated online without permission, of regular people. They didn't know anything about this issue. And everybody was victim blaming. It was like, oh, well, it's their own fault if they have a nude picture online. And so I had to fight literally the media, the public, law enforcement, and the legislators, because most of them were not interested in putting laws in place to protect these victims. So it started off really hard, but then eventually we got a lot of support, and now everything is completely changed and everybody is on the victim side, and there's no more victim blaming for the most part. So it's really turned around in the past 12 years.
Wow, I would imagine that sometimes you're like, where were you all at 12 years ago? Because I saw the news, especially in that documentary, and I kind of went down a rabbit hole, and all of the victim shaming that they were doing in the
Hmm.
public, some of those same people right now, they're like a champion for this cause. Do you ever say,
Hmm.
like, where were you when we needed you?
Well, I mean, I'm just happy that people have turned around and changed their view and they care about the victims now. So, to me, that's the success, and no reason to harp on the negative in the past. But I do want to keep moving forward and get a federal law passed and, continue to move with trying to protect victims and, get behavior on the internet not to be so much bullying and so much hatred of others and trying to ruin lives, which is what this website was about. It was about destroying lives or trying to drive people to suicide, getting them fired from their jobs. It was really, really a horrific website, as you could see in the documentary.
Yeah, and that was one of my questions as far as the trying to get people fired. I noticed that when that teacher was brought up during the documentary, I noticed that that made you get really, really emotional. I think that was one of the first times on the documentary where I actually saw you get that emotional and cry. What was that like in that period? Not only seeing your daughter go through that, but seeing other people have to go through that as well
Yeah,
firsthand.
I think, that particular story with that teacher from Kansas, I actually knew about that story from the very beginning all the way to the end. In fact, I knew about it before it was posted because the website owner put on Twitter that he was going to post it. And should I post it? And his followers were like, yeah, get her fired, fire that slut. Oh, they have a horror teaching their children. And so he posted it. And then that was the cue for the followers to send the nude pictures out to the school board and the parents and everybody they could to try to get her fired. So I knew about it before it started happening. I called the school that morning and left a message for her to call me. And she during that time was in her classroom. She had no idea that these pictures were online. And the principal had come in and said, get your things together and go home. And she's like, why? He said, get your things together and go home. So she got her things. She walked out to the front desk. They gave her my message. She didn't know who I was. She walked into the parking lot. That's when she called me. That's when she knew about this. And she ended up having to face the school board and ended up getting fired. And it was a huge ordeal. And she was just one of many teachers who I've talked to over the years. I mean, there's so many, policemen's wives, and, there's elderly people who were nude on the website, or people who were, had mental and physical disfigurement and other kinds of problems. And so it was about hurting people and ridiculing people. It had nothing to do with pornography.
Wow. Wow, that that is excuse my language, but that is some sick shit. So
Hmm.
you I guess I didn't realize that. So that was like the whole thing was to create humiliation and to
Hmm.
get them to harm themselves.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the website is if he just had nude pictures, there are plenty of porn stars out there who don't care if their pictures are circulated. That was not interesting. That was not going to drive traffic to the website. That was not going to make him internet famous, wasn't going to bring him any money. So he wasn't interested in that. He wanted to embarrass and humiliate people because that's what his followers were looking for. And he had a lot of followers. He had 600,000 followers on Twitter. He had 30 million page views per month on his website. It was called isanyoneup.com. And he was the most hated man on the internet, is what he was called by the press. And he loved that title. He wanted to be that bad person. They used Charles Manson language. He was the father. His followers were the children. They were all the family. And he would, people would say, I will kill for you, father. Tell me what you want me to do. So it was very much like a cult. It was very much where he would tell people to do things and they would do them. Lick the toilet or pee on the fast food if you work at a fast food restaurant, and send me pictures of the French fries that you're serving to the customer. And he would get people to do stuff like that in addition to posting these pictures. But they didn't just post the pictures. He posted your name, your social media link, your city, sometimes your parents' phone number, your employer's name, a lot of identifying information. So that's how the followers could then try to ruin that person's life.
Wow. Yeah. When you said that, as far as them linking it to the social media, that gave me anxiety. And as a parent, my kids right now, I mean, they're teenagers. They're not allowed to be on social media, and not just because of this, but other concerns as well. But I cannot think or fathom how that must have felt when your daughter called you and she's like, "Hey, mom, I got this going on." I bet you were enraged, right?
I wasn't enraged. I mean, I was just shocked. I had certainly never heard of revenge porn. I was horrified because I thought this could circulate and this could ruin her life. I know what the internet does. Things, multiply online if they're nude pictures, especially. And it's very hard to get rid of something because it appears on one site and then other sites pick it up. So, I just knew that I would have to immediately get to work in getting this picture down. My daughter was so distraught. I knew there was no way she was going to be able to fight on her own behalf. And I have come to realize that that's how most of these victims are. They just cannot fight. They feel so abused, so violated. They just want to curl up in a ball and forget about the world. And the immediate reaction is to shut down your social media profiles and shut down everything online. But that's actually the wrong reaction, because what happens is when you have a nude picture, it usually ends up coming up like first in Google. And so what you want to do is you want to build up your online presence with positive things and push that picture way down so that people don't see it. So that was one of the, types of advice I would give victims after I would speak with them.
That's perfect. That's perfect that you say that, because this kind of stuff is still happening. So I think
Hmm.
that is a good tip. Thank you for throwing that out there. I wanted to bring up the fact, I noticed that when this first happened and you all finally bought Charles in, I said bought him in like I know y'all, but let me tell you, I was glued. I was glued to this story, and if I'm smiling, it's just purely out of admiration for you and your sleuthing abilities, and the way that you were able to kind of ring this in. But when you all bought your husband in the situation, it seemed to be kind of lost on him a little bit. And
Mhm.
I was wondering, do you deal with other people right now to where they're just other parents to where they kind of have the same reaction? Or do you feel like most parents, they understand how big this is when it happens?
Well, I haven't talked to that many parents. You'd be surprised that I would say that like 99% of the people I've spoken with, of the 800 or so people, have been the victims. And they usually don't want their parents to know. They don't want their friends to know. They
Mm.
don't want anybody to know. So they're calling me just because I have experience with the issue. They're looking for advice. But the parents I have spoken with, and there have been a few, they have understood that this is a major deal and that that content needs to be removed and that this could really harm their child. And so I haven't run into parents who were, you know, attacking their children or criticizing or saying this is no big deal. I have not run into that. My husband is a lot older than me. He never goes on the internet. So it's like he just doesn't know, he just is like, oh, it's no big deal. It'll just go away. That was his initial reaction, which of course is incorrect, but that's what he thought based on his limited experience with online activity.
Yeah, his portrayed him in that, I thought he was a cool dude, and he actually ended up being being very instrumental in helping
Mhm.
you get Kayla's picture down. Correct?
Right. I had tried every avenue, not only going to the police department and getting an FBI investigation started, but I also called the website owners, advertisers, and his publicist and his lawyer a couple of times. I even tried to call his mom, but I had a couple of conversations with his lawyer. I could tell that the man was not really taking me seriously. And so finally, when I was able to convince my husband to help, because he was a lawyer, I was able to get my husband to talk to the website owner's lawyer, and that actually kind of put a fire under them. And that's how it eventually came down.
Wow, wow. What I was curious, um, what would you tell people that are in this situation, especially younger kids, if they were to have this kind of stuff being put on the internet? What would you tell them if they're like, "Oh, I shouldn't tell my parents that I have this going on"?
Well, I suppose you should tell your parents and try to get people to help you, especially if you feel helpless that you can't do anything. One thing I would advise people to do, whether they have this type of content or not, is to have a social media prenup or a postnup, some kind of document with your boyfriend, for example, that says that you will not put nude pictures, that you will not attack each other online. I mean, you have some document drawn up in advance of a relationship, or even if you're already in a relationship. And keep in mind that if you take a picture of yourself, you own the copyright. And so, under the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, you are supposed to be able to get that content removed within no more than 72 hours. So, if someone else takes the picture, technically they own that content. And so it makes it a little bit harder for you because you're not the copyright owner. But if you can get them to sign that copyright over to you, then you have control, and you can send out notices to Google and to, the different search engines and different websites asking them to remove it. Now, they may or may not comply because, of course, there are a lot of websites out there that are, I would say, kind of nefarious, and they just don't care. And there are also a lot of websites that originate from other countries where, US law doesn't really have any sway. So that makes it difficult. But these are some of the tools that you could use to try to get the content removed and try to get better your situation.
Wow, so there's still sites like this up?
Well, there's supposedly, according to The Economist, there are 3,000 revenge porn websites in the world. So I don't know. That's the only time I've ever read a statistic like that. So there definitely are sites like this. The biggest ones in the US seem to have kind of gone away because of prosecution, because of different government agencies that have found a way to shut some of them down. And so I don't really feel like it's kind of as prominent in the US. It doesn't feel as prominent that as it used to be. But as I said, a lot of these websites can originate from other countries, and it's extremely difficult to get your content removed if it's not in the United States.
Hey, this is Tony Taylor, the host of Leaders Lead the podcast and also the owner of speakuniversity.org. Let me tell you about our fantastic partners at Holocell Technologies. They are your one-stop shop for IT solutions. When it comes to data security, communications, and privacy, they are on top of the game. Holocell's approach is all about crafting customized white glove solutions that perfectly fit your specific software and use cases, all developed and implemented to the highest absolute standards. It's simple, folks. With Holocell Technologies, you'll get all the data and communication solutions you need without the headache. Give it up to our friends at Holocell Technologies. Wow. I can't imagine the type of scumbag that would not only put this kind of stuff out, but would be entertained by this. And I can't,
Hmm.
this is 12 years ago. So I'm thinking about the people that were into this kind of stuff back then, they're probably the same folks right now that are like CEOs of companies and stuff like that. It's just, I don't know. It's just really repulsive to me. You brought up the fact of uh, a social media prenup. What is that? I didn't even
Like
know that that was a thing.
like a prenuptial agreement, like a social media prenup, which is basically says that before you start the relationship, both parties are going to sign agreeing that we will never post nude pictures or any pictures you don't like, or we won't say bad things about each other, even if we get into a fight, etc. It's just a little bit of protection, that you wouldn't have to worry about this down the road with regards to the person you're dating in case you decided to share nude pictures with that person. Now, my daughter had never sent her topless picture. She had taken one picture. She never had sent it to anyone, but she was hacked. And this particular website, the reason the FBI were able to arrest the website owner and his hacker is because of the hacking. Because back then, we had no law against revenge porn. See, now we do have laws. So now you can be arrested for it, but back then you couldn't. And so because he was hacking, that's what gave us that ability to have him go to jail. And also, you should know that there were, when I did my little survey of his site, 12% of the people who were victimized on the site were victims of morphed porn, or what we call deep fakes. So, in other words, someone had taken that person's head, put it on a porn star's body, and make it look like it's that person, and then sending that out to clients, or the boss or the family or whatever, trying to ruin that person's life, and it's not even their nude body. So it shows how anybody could be victimized. Even if you never took a picture of yourself, someone could put your head on somebody else's body, and you could still end up nude on the internet.
Wow. And with AI these days, I would
Hmm.
imagine that it would look pretty real. They just did that to Taylor Swift this week. Did you hear about that?
I heard a little bit about it. I don't know any details, but yeah, I know it happens all the time, and it's something like $20 to make an AI version of whatever you're looking for, and it's difficult because the people who are trying to stop that, it's a lot harder to stop than it is to just pay $20 and get some little AI version of something put online that looks extremely real.
Wow. I wanted to ask you, I noticed, and you mentioned that you ended up taking the scum. I don't know why I keep referring to him as a scum. That's a good way to talk about this guy's scumbag, right?
That's perfectly acceptable.
All right. I noticed that when you were in the midst of taking him down, you were on Dr. Drew's show, and he was
Hmm.
actually on the show too. And he was trying to hide the fact that he was a scumbag. And he said something, and I don't know why, but I keyed in on your face when I think he said something like, I am not remorseful or something like that. You were like, you know which part I'm talking about?
I can't remember, but he might have said he wasn't hacking during that interview. I don't remember, but it's possible that he said, like, oh, I get way more content that I could ever use. I don't need to hack. It's possible that he was saying that during that interview. And of course, I would be like, excuse me, I happen to know that's false, So yeah, he was he at one point he had taken his site down briefly, and then he was going to put it back up with all the original content, but he was going to make it worse because he was going to put the home addresses of all the victims with driving directions on how to get to their houses. So that might have been like during the period where he was about to do that. I don't remember that particular interview, but yeah, I definitely did face off with him at one point on Dr. Drew.
Wow. And I know he came after you. I would imagine that that was horrible because he had all of his cultish members kind of doing the
Hmm.
same, right?
Right. I mean, at one point he said he was going to take a gun and kill the person who told the press about the FBI investigation, which of course was me because I'm the one who started the FBI investigation and I am the one who had told the Village Voice. But yeah, I mean, it was scary because I was getting death threats from his followers. I was getting computer viruses. I even had a stalker at my house. Some of the things that happened were not in that docuseries, and the stalker was not put in there. But we had a guy sitting outside our house who we believe was trying to hack into our network. And I actually confronted him at one point and marched up to the car and said, "May I help you?" And he freaked out and zoomed away. He almost hit my neighbor's wall. So, but yeah, it was scary because when you're getting all these death threats, you don't know if these are people who just got out of prison or these people who own guns or these people with anger issues. You have no idea. And I also went to the store and bought locks for my gates to, protect my property so they couldn't get into my backyard. And I have animals and I was worried about the safety of my animals, which was, I felt that their safety was more in peril than my own or my family, because it would be very easy to do something to an animal and not really get in big trouble for that in our society.
Yeah. Did you ever think about when you were going through that, did quitting ever cross your mind?
No, it never did. I mean, I know that perseverance is important. That's the key to success. And I knew that it was more than just my daughter. I mean, once my daughter's picture came down, then it was like, I've got to help all these other victims. They're still on the site. I've got to get a law passed. I mean, this was a big cause. I knew this wasn't something where you just get your own child's picture down and you just walk away. That would be the wrong thing to do, in my opinion. So I was in it for the long haul, and I devoted a lot of time to it, and I still devote time to helping victims, here and there, because there are always people who need help and need advice.
Oh, I think that is so incredible, and I really mean it. I'm really inspired by you and your journey, and I'm very grateful, especially coming from a father. I'm really grateful for what you did. Something else that I was very inspired by you by was your beginning, and I know that you were known before, but not just the person that took down the most hated man on the internet, but you were known for doing some other cool stuff back in the day. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. I started party crashing when I was very young. And I had grown up in Atlanta, Georgia, with an adoptive family, adoptive parents. And it was a really negative childhood. My dad was verbally abusive. My mom committed suicide. She didn't die right away. She ended up being hooked up to machines in a semi conscious state for 10 years before she officially died. And my brother died in a car accident when he was 16. And when my brother died, my father said, you were always the bad one. He was the good one. You're the one who should have died, not him. So that gives you a flavor of my childhood. I grew up in Atlanta, where it was upper class Atlanta. It was extremely racist. I was called an N lover every day. I was, fighting for civil rights. Nobody agreed with me. And so I was just always the outcast. And luckily, I had a television set. And I looked at the TV and I could see that other people in other parts of the world had a different view. I saw the open mindedness of the entertainment industry, and I was very drawn to that as a child. And so I essentially started crashing events to meet people in the entertainment industry who became my substitute family, essentially, when I was a teenager. And it was, I got my first movie part because I was working as answering phones at a restaurant. It was really an ice cream parlor. And this guy called and said, was looking for a different employee, and said that I said I had to take a message. And he said, tell him to be at the audition tomorrow at 2 o'clock or whatever. And so I made a copy of that message for myself and gave it to the guy. And at 2 o'clock, I skipped school. I showed up at that audition. It was so funny because I was all dressed up in this sequin dress, really fancy looking. And all the people in the waiting room were men in army uniforms. There wasn't a single woman there except the receptionist. And I walked up to the desk trying to be confident and said, my agent told me to be here. Of course, I had no agent. I'd never done any acting in my life. And she's like baffled. And she goes, oh, that's really weird. All the women were already cast. She said, she goes, oh, and then she noticed that someone had not shown up on the set, and the party girl, right? So she goes, oh, are you supposed to be the party girl? Maybe you were already cast. I go, that must be it. I must have already been cast. She goes, hurry to the set, see makeup and hair. And so I went out to the set. I ended up getting a part in the movie. I got paid for it, the whole thing, just for crashing an audition. And so that was kind of one of the first things I did. I believe I was like 17 years old at that time. And I realized as I got older, it wasn't just for fun. You actually could meet VIPs who, you could lobby for legislation. You could get donations for nonprofit causes. You could get interviews for books or articles that you were writing. You could get clients for, I was a real estate agent. I could get real estate clients, or I could, peddle my treatments or my books to various celebrities, like for their book club, or, I want to make a movie and go backstage and meet Steven Spielberg and say, pitch him my idea. So I realized that there were all these benefits to meeting the rich and famous, essentially. And a lot of these fundraisers they have are $40,000, $100,000 per person. I can't afford that, but these wealthy people get access, for example, to politicians to be able to talk about the issues that are important to them. But if you crash, you get access to the politicians and it doesn't cost anything. So that's what I did. I did it a lot when I was in my late teens, early 20s. And then I kind of pretty much stopped, except when I had a goal. If I had something I needed to do, or, as I said, I needed to get interviews, it's easier to go to the Emmy Awards and walk around and go from celebrity to celebrity asking questions, as opposed to going to the trouble to trying to set up an interview with a publicist. And then they, set a date. It's like a huge hassle. So that's what I would do. And it's been very fruitful in my life.
That's what I was going to ask you. What kind of, because you mentioned goals, and I'm glad that you said that. What type of goals did you have during that time when you were going and crashing the Emmys and these parties and stuff like that? What were you working on?
Well, I was kind of always working on various causes that were important. So I started out with the civil rights movement, and that was an important cause to me, and it still is, of course. And then animal rights became very important to me, and it still is. And I've also done a lot of work for gay rights, and then with the revenge porn thing has become important. But I always just kind of wanted to be a voice and be able to, try to make the world better with different unusual opinions, or coming up with ideas that are, interesting. And, when I first started out, I thought maybe I wanted to be an actress. And I did do some acting in my early 20s and realized that's not what I wanted to do. But I thought originally that was what I was interested in. And when you meet these people, you become kind of an insider, and you get parts, and you get, connections, and you get the line on something that's happening, and, oh, you could come and do this and be in this. And so, there's a lot of benefit to that. And that was what it started with. But then, I've had over 30 jobs in my life. I've been a city commissioner. I have been the president of a legal nonprofit organization. I have been a cab driver. I've been a nurse. I've been an aerobics instructor. I was a bodyguard for a prostitute. I've been a backup singer for an Elvis imitator. I was a local council member in Los Angeles. I have been, as I said, an actress, a stand-up comic. I've done lots and lots of different things in my life. And I was a private investigator for many years. And I even worked as a lecturer for the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia. So it's kind of cool because I really enjoy kind of getting a glimpse of these different lives and these different occupations. And so I feel like I've really had a chance to kind of look at, different parts of life and different kinds of things that people do. And that also really helps you when you're a writer, which is what I primarily do now. And when you're, going on TV because I was on BBC for a while. I was a commentator on The Filter on NBC for about 4 years. So when you're doing that as well, it gives you a lot of information and background that you can speak to when somebody brings up an issue. You can, you remember, oh, I did something similar to that, and it gives you a story to tell, or it gives you kind of an angle that someone else might not have. So I have done a lot of punditry with regards to news and current events and even politics. I really love doing that because a lot of times my opinion is very different from any of the other opinions out there. And I'm not, a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I'm an independent. And that's very hard to be certainly in this country at this time, because most people seem to be on one side or the other. And it's very hard to get your voice heard when you have a different view. Even when I was writing articles back, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, if I didn't write something that spoke to the readership of either the liberal publication or the conservative publication, it was almost impossible to get that article published because they only wanted something that their audience was going to say, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's what they wanted. They didn't want something that was unusual or different or had a different view, or something where you're criticizing, where you're criticizing both sides. They want you in sync with that particular ideology. And so, it's worse now, but it was really bad even, 20, 25 years ago. But I think it's important to get, I believe in free speech. I believe in trying to get lots of ideas out there. And I feel like that's, really important to me.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you were a pundit on these shows, and when I went into my deep dive, I noticed you on several different shows, and one thing that stuck out to me was that you're an excellent public speaker. Have you always been so well spoken, or has it been something that you've had to work on?
Well, I don't know if I think I'm that good of a public speaker, but I think that's a very sweet compliment to give me. I haven't really worked on it. I did go to Toastmasters for a year, so perhaps that helped a little bit. That was many, many years ago. But I like, I just, it's very exciting. I mean, it's very exciting when you feel like you can try to influence and, certainly put things out there to give people ideas to think about, or if you can try to inspire. And I mean, that's important to me. And I like to try to encourage people to go after their dreams and go after their goals, and persevere. And I say that perseverance is the key to success, but what I call other centrism, or helping others, humans and non-humans, that's the key to happiness. And so it's kind of putting your heart into a cause or multiple causes is, in my opinion, what brings you meaning and brings you happiness.
You're speaking my language. I'm curious, and this is a different type of question. A lot of our listeners and our viewers, they're wanting to do some of the same things that you've done, as far as getting on TV, getting on some of these shows. As someone that literally broke into the industry, what advice would you give them right now in 2024 in order to do exactly what you did?
Well, one way that a lot of the producers for the different shows will pick up their guests from articles. So if you write article about a topic and you say you have a interesting angle, or it reinforces or whatever, you may get phone calls from these producers and say, would you like to come on our show? And, we'd like to interview you about this subject. And so I get a lot of interviews because of that. So I would say that if you're, if someone can write, and getting something published is not that easy, as I said, especially when you don't fall in sync with either the left or the right. But even when you do, you may have to submit it. You have to submit for about 3 days. I mean, it takes like 3 days of sending out your article to multiple different newspapers, and until you finally get a yes. And most of my articles, I probably submit it 20 times before I finally get a yes. So it's kind of a a huge deal. It's like you write it, you spend the time writing it, but that's only the first step. Now you've got to get it published. And then once you get it published, then you can try to promote it a little bit online on social media, etc. And then you can even send it off to some of the producers at various TV shows and say, hey, I would love to come on and discuss this issue with your audience. And you might get some yeses from that.
That's awesome. So you write it and then you send it to them, or they'll pick it up, and then that's how you're able to get on the shows.
Right. Now, when I did the filter on NBC, Fred Rogan, who is kind of a minor celebrity here in the Los Angeles area, you probably don't know him throughout the country, but he's a newscaster, a sportscaster on television on NBC in Los Angeles, and he has been for decades. So he started this show, and he was looking for people to be regulars on his show, and he found another show that I was doing. I had started a public access show, just a little dinky show that anybody could do back then. And I was the host, and I would have guests on, and we would discuss news and current events. And he saw one of those episodes and contacted me and said, I'd like you to be on my NBC show. And I was like, yes, that's great. I definitely want to do it. And so I ended up doing that for 4 years, and even got one of my episodes was nominated for an Emmy, which was pretty cool. So I'm officially an Emmy Award loser. Yay. So, even, doing a podcast. I mean, you never know who's going to see that podcast, and somebody could be watching you, Tony, and say, hey, let's put him on, or he should be a regular on, this other show. And so you get offers off of that. Anytime you put yourself out there and, say yes to life, go for it. If someone gives you an opportunity, don't shy away or be afraid of failure or afraid of success, but just try to say yes to as many opportunities as possible.
Wow, I'm curious. Do you have a podcast? Because the reason I'm asking is, I would love, and I know we only got a short time to go, but I could probably listen to some of the stories that I'm sure that you have, and being in some of the rooms that you've been in. I could totally see that on a podcast. Please tell me you got a podcast.
I don't have a podcast, but everybody keeps telling me I should have one. So it's very funny. It's something I'd have to. It's appealing to me. We'll see, maybe down the road, but right now I don't have one.
All right. Well, you have a friend in me. If you need help setting up your podcast, I would certainly help you. I got the feeling just from talking to you that you are and always have been a dreamer. Is that correct?
I've always had big goals. Yeah, that is true. Yeah, I guess you could say that. I mean, I feel like I try to make them happen. So I don't feel like I'm a person who dreams and then just dreams and dreams and never actually puts anything into action. I think I have always kind of really tried to go after whatever it was that dream was. And so, yeah, I guess that's probably true.
Wow. So what are your dreams right now? Like, what are you working on right now? I'm curious.
I'm working on basically an academic book. I have a PhD in social ethics, and I'm working on a book called Omniocracy, which is about basically a government with representation for all living beings. And I don't support democracy, which is of and by and for one species, Homo sapiens, nobody else. So that's what my current book is about. And I have other book projects coming up that I am very interested in making happen after this one is completed.
That's amazing. Where can we find your previous books?
Well, you can find them on Amazon or at the bookstore. I have 2 memoirs. One is called Undercover, Debutante, and the other is called Rebel in High Heels. And they cover different periods of my life. So it's not like they're repetitive at all. So those are my 2 memoirs. And then I tracked down my birth family, because I told you earlier I was adopted. So I tracked down my birth family using my gate crashing skills and my private eye skills. And so I found found out essentially that my grandfather, my birth grandfather, was murdered by a devil worshiper in 1948 in West Virginia. And it's an amazing story. And I wrote a nonfiction novel about that story called Devil in the Basement. So that's another book that I wrote. And I have a great relationship with my birth family, my mom, my dad. I have a brother and sister who didn't even know they had a sibling up until a few years ago. So it's really wonderful. Genetics is very powerful and much more powerful than environment. That is my 2 cents.
I bet you they think you're just the coolest, and they probably tell everybody like we have a relative that is a badass.
Well, thank you. That's a compliment.
No, definitely. I mean it. And this isn't just lip service. I mean, just watching you, I was just like, oh my God, I am so inspired by this lady. And I'm even more inspired by you just from meeting you and talking to you. You've been so kind. And I am very gracious to have you on the show. I got one last question. And and that question is your legacy when it's all said and done, because I know you've done a lot. What would you want your legacy to be?
Well, I would want people to recognize that I, tried to make the world better, that I worked hard on various causes. My favorite compliment is, "You're a philosopher." She's a philosopher. I love being called a philosopher. I know most people are not into philosophy, but I love philosophy. And so, yeah, I think that, that I contributed to the field of philosophy in some way, and that I contributed to the field of animal rights and revenge porn. And because, my views are not, as I said earlier, my views are not always, in line with the mainstream. I have different views, and my animal rights views are very different from what the animal rights movement currently states. And so that's what my new book is about. So yeah, so I would want to be seen as kind of an out of the box thinker and somebody who's a bit of a rebel, a bit of a radical, and tried to do good things.
Yeah, you're definitely living out your legacy. And again, I want to tell you thank you for giving me the time. This has been so amazing. This has been a dream come true. And from the bottom of my heart, I really appreciate the work that you're doing all across the world. I think that is really incredible. I think that what you're doing and what you've done has certainly benefited me and my family, but many families all across the globe. So thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you for allowing me to travel with you on your journey. I want to say thank you for the things that you're doing, the things that you've done, and the things that you're gonna do, because I know that you're gonna do something truly amazing. Remember, I'm here to stand by you as you chase your dreams, lead with greatness, and continue to make a difference. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so that you can be notified every time we drop a new episode. I'll see you next time on Leaders Lead the Podcast. Peace.